Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and other things. I'm going to go a little bit wider today. Thank you all for your comments yesterday and your discussions. Lots of debate on whether or not it's even reasonable to think about something we can do to mitigate or get us out of this mess. You know, there's lots of ideas out there. There's a wide spectrum of beliefs. And, you know, I remain open to the spectrum of, you know, in fact, my beliefs actually include both sides of the spectrum. So I don't knock one side for, you know, I think that there's some truth in all the arguments is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, you know, I believe that we're in a bad way. I believe that climate change is upon us already, obviously, and we're already seeing the destruction that it's wreaking. I also believe that, you know, maybe, just maybe, by a slim thread of a chance, we could possibly steer ourselves in another direction. And I also believe that that is the only thing to do, because if you try, you might fail, but if you don't try, you're definitely going to fail. Moving into, well, I'm going to start with climate change and then kind of go to other places. Climate change, this is from The Guardian, this is from today. Climate change, cause of most underreported humanitarian crisis. Or crises. Report says few headlines sparked by food crises that ravaged Madagascar, Ethiopia, and Haiti. Climate change was responsible for the majority of underreported humanitarian disasters last year, according to analysis of more than 1 million online news stories. Climate change was responsible for the majority of underreported humanitarian disasters. Whole populations, I would probably put war up there too. War was the cause of underreported humanitarian disasters. Because, you know, we know that we're at war, but we don't really like to talk about it. You know, it's not daily news unless something big happens. But, you know, every day, another day grinds on that we're at war and we bomb people and we kill people and we just go, oh, that happened. Whole populations were affected by food crises in countries ravaged by drought and hurricanes such as Ethiopia and Haiti. Yet neither crisis generated more than 1,000 global news stories each. In Madagascar, more than 1 million people went hungry as corn, cassava, and rice fields withered under drought and severe El Nino conditions. Almost half the country's children have been stunted, but their suffering sparked few headlines. Sven, I actually didn't know much about Madagascar, that they were having a food crisis. I didn't know that. So here I am being educated. Sven Harmeling, the climate change lead for CARE International, which commissioned the report, said not only are the people who live in the world's poorest countries most vulnerable to climate change, but they are also the least equipped to address its increasing impacts. Media must not turn a blind eye to such crises and the role of climate change. Assad Remin, the executive director of War on Want, blamed a climate change reporting that prefers pictures of polar bears to those we are killing with our inaction. He said climate change has long had its fingerprints over untold killer floods, droughts, and famines. Unfortunately, the people being sacrificed every day to the climate crisis are those least responsible for it. They have been deliberately made invisible because the lives of those with black and brown skins simply don't matter. Around the world, extreme weather events claimed about 5,000 lives in 2018 and left almost 29 million people in need of humanitarian aid and emergency assistance. The CARE report links climate change to civil disasters in Sudan, Chad, the Philippines, Madagascar, and Ethiopia. It says it played an exacerbating role in Haiti. Don't forget Syria. Don't forget Central America and South America. That's happening as well. 9 of 10 most neglected tragedies occurred in countries in the Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific Group of States, or ACP. Dr. Vawanu Gnasunu, the ACP's Assistant Secretary General, said, "We try always to show that these disasters are linked to climate change, but we have to get our points heard. We have not been very successful until now. The media coverage is poor and and reported in terms of disaster, not linked to climate change or its consequences." Nasunu also said, who is also the ACP's Sustainable Development spokesman, said that donor countries sometimes implicitly linked crisis aid to silence about climate change. They will never say it formally, but it's part of the conversation. He said, they prefer that you condemn yourself by saying that you did not have a proper policy to prevent disaster. Now you need their support. Scientists have tended to be wary of attributing individual weather events to global warming, but many are increasingly reluctant to underplay trends in line with climate models. It's becoming so very obvious. It's a little silly to say we don't know. Last year, the European Academy's Science Advisory Council said climate change this decade has been fundamentally responsible for driving a 50% increase in flood frequencies and a similar surge in storms, droughts, and heat waves. That sounds like climate change is responsible, doesn't it? In July, the World Meteorological Organization described extreme heat wave conditions as consistent with what we expect as a result of climate change. Later that month, one of the world's leading climate scientists, Professor Michael Mann, described accelerating extreme weather events as the face of climate change. However, Dr. Friedrich Otto, the deputy director of Oxford University's Environmental Change Institute, added a note of caution. She said, not every humanitarian disaster has climate change as a major player. Some are actually being made less likely by climate change, and in some climate change, oh, be quiet. Anyways. So I want to cover this. This is hilarious. This just hit Facebook, Huffington Post, and other places yesterday. And this is some knee slapping goodness. Leaked footage shows Tucker Carlson's epic meltdown after being schooled by Dutch historian. And this is great stuff. Anyways, I'm going to read this article, but there's the video in here. So they didn't air this on Fox News, but somebody got a tape of it, or he got a tape of it, of the interview, and it's linked in this article, and it's good stuff. It's just great. Dutch historian and author Rutger Bregman became a political superstar overnight after delivering a blistering speech about the super rich at the 2019 World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland last January. During a private panel in front of some of the world's wealthiest people, he chastised them for not addressing the elephant in the room, taxes. I mean, 1,500 private jets have flown in here to hear Sir David Attenborough speak about how we're wrecking the planet. Bregman said, I hear people talking the language of participation and justice and equality and transparency, but then almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, he said to a shocked room, and of the rich just not paying their fair share. It feels like I'm at a firefighters conference and no one is allowed to speak about water. Now, Bregman is back in the news for boldly exposing Fox News host Tucker Carlson right to his face. The segment got so ugly, Fox News decided not to air it because Tucker Carlson blew his mind, blew a gasket. So this guy tweeted at Tucker Carlson, "Good morning, Tucker Carlson. Why didn't you air the interview with me last night? Couldn't handle the criticism? I think you should just show it and try to resist the temptation to edit. I've recorded the full thing, including that moment when you start swearing profusely." Fox News senior executive producer Justin Wells blamed Bregman. Of course he did, saying he turned an opportunity to have a substantive, informative discussion into an obviously calculated personal insult campaign. We were disappointed in the segment and respect our audience's time too much to consider airing it. No, you don't. That's a bald-faced lie. Carlson has recently rebranded himself as a Trump-era populist who's critical of the shadowy elites who sold out the little guy. In the beginning of the interview, Carlson is giddy over how Bregman called out the world's elites for taking private jets to talk about climate change, a charge the right has often lobbed at wealthy environmentalists such as former Vice President and climate activist Al Gore. That's one of the great moments, maybe the great moment in Davos history, Carlson said. If I was wearing a hat, I would take it off to you, Carlson said. But Bregman quickly steered the conversation into tax avoidance, the big issue he hit on at Davos. I think the issue really is one of corruption and of people being bribed and not talking about the real issues. What the Murdochs really want you to do is scapegoat immigrants instead of talking about tax avoidance, he said. Bregman was referencing Rupert Murdoch, the billionaire Australian media mogul and owner of Fox News' parent company, who has used his vast media empire to promote right-wing propaganda. He also noted that Carlson has been a senior fellow at the Cato Institute, a think tank funded by billionaire Republican donors, the Koch brothers. Bregman, you're a millionaire funded by billionaires. That's what you are. I'm glad you finally now jumped the bandwagon of people like Bernie Sanders and AOC, but you're not part of the solution, Mr. Carlson. You're part of the problem, actually. Carlson, but AOC, but I could just say, and Bregman, it's true, right? That's all the anchors on Fox. Carlson, you would have to be a moron. Bregman, they're all millionaires. How is this possible? Well, it's very easy. You're just not talking about certain things. Carlson, Fox doesn't even play where you are. Bregman, it doesn't play where you are? Well, have you heard of the internet? I can watch things whenever I want, you know. Carlson, you haven't seen Fox before. Bregman, I have, actually. I can't say I'm a great fan of your show, but I do my homework when you invite me onto your show, so you're probably not going to air this. Carlson, I doubt it. Bregman, but I went to Davos to speak truth to power, and I'm doing exactly the same thing right now. You may not like it, but you're a millionaire funded by billionaires, and that's the reason why you're not talking about these issues. Carlson, but I am talking about these issues. Bregman, but only now. Come on, you jumped the bandwagon. You're like, oh, I'm against the globalist elite, blah, blah, blah. It's not very convincing, to be honest. Carlson, I want to say to you, why don't you go fuck yourself, you tiny brain? And I hope this gets picked up because you're a moron. I tried to give you a hearing, but you're too fucking annoying. So there you go. If you can't refute the facts, you just start cussing people out or, you know, calling them names. Bregman, you can't handle the criticism, can you? The end. So I'm going to link this below. And I'm going to move on. The video is really satisfying, and it's satisfying to see Tucker Carlson just get mopped. I mean, he didn't really have anything to say. He got mollywopped, as some might call it. What else did I want to say? Listening to Fox News talk about, things like Green New Deal or talk about actual economic justice is like listening to second graders talk about trigonometry. Like, what's going, what does this mean? I don't know. This is stupid. Can we go have a snack? They can't even intellectually, as an intellectual concept, they can't even get their minds around it. And, because of that, they keep their viewers at basically a second grade understanding of what's going on in the world. And that is a crime, actually. Crime against humanity. We're going to move on. I'm going to read another article from Way Past What the Fuck. The last installment, there were 3 I needed to read this week, and this one is called We Are the Ones We Have Been Waiting For. Starts with a quote: "The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. We are the ones we have been waiting for." And it says unknown. I think I've seen that attributed to a lot of people, or maybe not. It's hard to tell in this age of memes and the internet. Everybody said everything. I've seen the same quote attributed to like Bob Marley and Einstein and, whatever. Terrence McKenna, just anybody. Anybody said anything at any time. I had always thought that we were all in this together, that rich and poor alike had a vested interest in maintaining the environment for the betterment of all life. That belief has been repeatedly shattered by the omnipresence of megalomaniac monsters whose only goal is to further their own interests. I no longer suffer from those delusions. Growing up in the 60s, the world did not seem like the awful place that it has become. As recently as 2 years ago, I still thought that the 60s and 70s were not a bad time. I was, of course, way off base. The 60s and 70s were really bad. I just didn't see it. It wasn't until later in the 80s that I became aware of folks like Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring in September of 1962, which documented the adverse environmental effects of the indiscriminate use of pesticides. It was then that I began to find out how bad and how hidden things had been when I was growing up. The massive growth of suburbs had not really gotten off the ground when I was prowling around in what is now called Silicon Valley. There were miles of orchards and small two-lane roads that you could walk or bicycle along and not see a car for hours on end. There were still small towns separated by stretches of country, and a farmer would come by our house twice a week in a horse-drawn wagon bringing fresh fruits and vegetables to our neighborhood. The hospital where I was born is in Santa Monica. In the lobby of this hospital is an aerial picture of the area that was taken on the month and year that I was born, and there are still dirt roads. In San Francisco, up until 1966, the Sutro baths were still open. Playland at the beach was open until the year before I graduated from high school. There was evidence of the past all around. It really was a fairyland, but the fairyland has been overrun by monsters. Any sign of how things were has been erased, replaced by the signs of greed, power, and inhumanity. My generation and the time in which we grew up was, I believe, the last time anyone would get to grow up relatively free of worry about the future. We are now on the edge of a reckoning. The bills racked up by the previous generations are now coming due, and everyone on the planet is going to pay dearly. The young people of today will not have the luxury of planning for a future. They will not have the luxury of hope. They will not have the luxury of growing old. Those luxuries are a thing of the past. We, all of us, have a choice to make. We have to choose between dying like dogs in the street or standing up for what is right and dying with our boots on. There was no time to ponder. There was no time to wait for a savior. There was no time to try to squeeze a little more unconscious behavior out of this wrung, dry rag of a society. I have said this before, but it bears repeating over and over. If necessary, it is time to fight. Awareness of a problem is fruitless and hollow, and if the awareness does not result in action, hollow if the awareness does not result in action. There is hope in action, and not the lame, mindless hope for a fix or a reprieve, but the hope of knowing that you are becoming the person you are meant to be, the warrior who will not stand idly by while everything sacred is being defiled. Even in the hollowed halls of the doomosphere, I can still see little glimmers. No one wants to die, and so no matter how aware we are of the problem, we continue for some reason to believe that maybe there is a fix. There is not. We are on our way out, and the sooner you accept that, really accept it, the better you will be able to cope. We are all alone, and no one is coming to save us. However cynical that might sound, it is the truth. No congressman or woman, no president, no governor, no one is coming. It's just us, gathered around the campfire and watching the advancing storm. If you are tired of watching, if you are tired of waiting, if you are tired of cheering on mindless representatives of the power structure, if you are tired of having the owners dictate the terms of your life and the lives of your children and loved ones, then get the fuck up, turn off the computer, shut down the noise, and get out and get dirty, because dirty is what you will get when you go for the throat of the demons who have taken over our souls. Woo! That was a good piece of work by Michael Campy. Exactly. We're, the likelihood of our doom is pretty much assured. However, you can still do something, and probably better to go out doing something than not. I happen to feel that is true myself. Moving on to a story out of New Orleans, how New Orleans reduced its homeless population by 90%. Across the U.S., more than 500,000 people have been identified as homeless. New Orleans faced a major crisis in homelessness following Hurricane Katrina. 2007, 2 years after the storm, there were more than 11,600 homeless people in the city. Since then, New Orleans stepped up its effort to tackle homelessness and has brought that number down 90%. Martha Cagle, executive director of Unity of Greater New Orleans, tells Here and Now's Jeremy Hobson the strategy to tackle the unprecedented explosion of homelessness in the city following Katrina was threefold. First, Cagle said Unity of Greater New Orleans, a nonprofit leading a collaborative of organizations providing housing and services to the homeless, had to assemble an outreach team that was willing to go anywhere and do anything to rescue and rehouse a homeless person. Second, Cagle says the group put all its effort behind gathering a rent assistance fund. We went directly to Congress, she said. We were very fortunate to get some resources together to actually be able to provide rent assistance and house people in what apartments we could find. And lastly, she says the team took a housing first approach, which is simply the idea that you accept people as they are, whether they are sober or not. You just accept them as they are and you provide the housing first, Cagle says. Then once they're in their apartment, you immediately wrap all the services around them that they need to stay stable and live the highest quality of life that they can live. Actually, this is a very cost-effective approach because when you think about it, it is costing the taxpayer a tremendous amount of money to leave people on the street. They're constantly cycling in and out of jail on charges that won't be relevant if they had an apartment, wouldn't be relevant if they had an apartment. Things like urinating in public, drinking in public, obstructing the sidewalk because they're having to sleep on the sidewalk, homeless offenses, in other words, that are costing the taxpayers a lot of money to be putting them in jail and processing them through the criminal justice system. Their health is deteriorating while they're out on the street. They're being taken by ambulance to the emergency room constantly. Those are huge charges. Really what you need is, a relatively small amount of money to pay for some rent assistance. And then they can contribute some of that rent as well with disability benefits. Or if they're able to work with, the employment income and a little bit of case management assistance. It really has been proven over and over again in studies to be very cost effective. That's all I'm going to read at this article. I'm going to link it below. But this has been implemented in other cities, Seattle being one of them, and I believe it's going to be implemented in Riverside, California, which is close to LA. This works. It just is proven to work. It costs less money. It costs the taxpayers less money. And this, just like free healthcare and free education, it is more valuable to it's not more expensive. All of that is a lie. All of this is a lie. All the Fox News is saying is a lie. All the conservative pundits are lying, cheating thieves. They're cheating you out of your future. They're cheating us out of what could be more healthy, joyful lives. They're cheating us. All of these giving people homes, giving people healthcare, giving people food. I'm all for basic income as well. Why not? We're giving people. It's going to help people in the long run, and it's going to cost less than pushing people into poverty and having to. All of those things end up costing people more money. But of course, all of this, the entire system is a Ponzi scheme, and the entire system is a scheme for the wealthy to sap energy and money from the poor and just bring it up to the top. All of this is, it's just a big game. Obviously, this is obvious. And so when people promote ideas such as, homes for the homeless, and healthcare for everybody, and education for everybody. That's what why the raving lunatics on all the mainstream news channels that just their heads just explode and this can never work. Oh, of course it can work. Of course it can work. That's like, if we brought home all the troops and stopped, spending all our money on military, that we could never do that. No, yes, we can do that. Of course that would work. Of course the world would be safer if we stopped building bombs and bombing people all over the planet in order to steal resources. This world would be a much safer, happier place, gentle place. And there's no reason why we can't have that. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a children's book idea. It's actually reality. All the lies that this can't happen are all made up by the monsters, the absolute psychopaths that run our society. And stop listening to them. Stop believing them. Start fighting back. Start telling them the truth, as did the Dutch historian professor did at Davos, as does Greta Thunberg every day, as does all the people who know that this is a lie. And the truth is going to serve people much better than the lie that we have been living in for so long. It's time to end the lie. I'm going to end this video with this article from James Howard Kunstler that is a follow-up or companion piece to the one I read the other day. Listen, so many people said he's a registered Democrat. He is a Democrat. And he clarifies in this article, he doesn't support Trump. He's not a white nationalist, as somebody tried to tell me in the comment section. Just, again, more false talking points from the powers that be that want to turn your brains into omelets so that they can do whatever they want. Just think for yourself. Scott Pelley commits career suicide. This is from February 18th, 2019. So this is about what's actually going on. Whether you like it or not, this is based in reality and in truth. And it's too bad because, we need more reality. We need more truth, because we can't even tackle the problems that we have unless we know what the problems are. Finally, you're left with an image of Scott Pelley sucking on his eyeglass frames as if he was trying to impersonate a character who might be called the old sage TV journalist. After neatly disgracing both himself and TV journalism in his puffy chat-up with Andrew McCabe, the ex-deputy FBI director who stage-managed the cover-up of the Russiagate fiasco in both of his phases. First to interfere with the 2016 election on behalf of Hillary Clinton, and then to oust the winner of the election, Mr. Trump. Perhaps Mr. Pelley was ruminating on all the topics he forgot to ask about, such as what Mr. McCabe meant by an insurance policy, quote unquote, in his conversations with counter-intel agent Peter Strzok and DOJ lawyer Lisa Page, or whether Mr. McCabe launched the Russia collusion investigation on the basis of the Steele dossier, which was already known at the time to be material furnished by the Hillary Clinton campaign. Did you guys know that? I bet you didn't know that, because you probably watch MSNBC or CNN, and they will never tell you that. Never. Or whether the contents of said dossier had ever been verified via established FBI protocol, the Woods procedure, which they never were. The audience was informed. This is fact, y'all. This is fact. Okay, so none can you know. The audience was informed at the very end that Mr. McCabe's case has been referred to the federal courts by the DOJ Inspector General. That was a nice way of saying that Mr. McCabe has been singing to a grand jury. If so, then he's an early bird, because many of his feathered friends will be following him into the grand jury chamber, and then we'll have the great battle of the alibis. Mainly what the McCabe interview accomplished was CBS tripling down on the empty Russia collusion narrative that has nourished the crusade to dump Mr. Trump by any means necessary for more than 2 years. Mr. McCabe described the chaos in the C-suites of the FBI after the president fired Director James Comey on May 7th of 2017 because we had lost our leader. It was an unbelievably stressful time, he said. Yes, I'm sure, because so many top officers in the Bureau were desperate to cover their asses, since Mrs. Clinton's unbelievable election loss meant that all the FBI emails and official memoranda documenting their behavior either had to be shoved down the memory hole illegally or left to be discovered by Mr. Trump. Indeed, some of it was illegally destroyed. For instance, the government issued cell phones of Miss Page and Mr. Strzok smashed to bits on Robert Mueller's instructions. Oh. Tampering with evidence, right? Do y'all remember? Do y'all know that as Hillary Clinton as well had all her phones smashed to bits during the FBI investigation? They didn't go like, "Hey, don't do that. You're not supposed to do that." They're all dirty, y'all. Sorry, you believe in the wrong people. Blah blah boo. Apparently, one of the main objectives in the 60 Minutes story was to paint Mr. McCabe as a heroic patriot defending America against the wicked, shape-shifting, all-powerful Russia, which had made Mr. Trump its captive. The 60 Minutes piece Happens to coincide exactly with the release of Mr. McCabe's ass-covering book, The Threat: How the FBI Protects America in the Age of Terror and Trump. That's a knee slapper right there. Real superheroes fight both. There you go. It also sets up a nice contrapuntal battle between the enigmatic Rod Rosenstein and Mr. McCabe vis-a-vis the idea of wearing a wire to record the president en route to running him over with the 25th Amendment. According to Mr. McCabe, there was a lot of lively discussion around this plan. Mr. Rosenstein has brushed it off as a gag. Mr. McCabe apparently thought it was dead serious. They never did get their story straight. In the meantime, Mr. McCabe's own colleagues in the FBI's ethics office and its inspector general charged him with lying repeatedly about his role in this matter. There you go. You had to wonder whether the attempt by CBS News to sell the sterling career story of Andrew McCabe, as Mr. Pelley put it, is really just a way for the network to cover its own ass and acting as a propaganda patsy in the long-running Russiagate affair. The 60-minute segment also coincided with William Barr's confirmation last week by the Senate as the Attorney General, as well as official reports issued by both House and Senate committees stating they found no evidence for the Trump-Russia collusion story. The ground is shifting under all the seditious hugger-mugger. Whether you are a Trump cheerleader or not, I'm not. That's Kunstler saying, I'm not. There is a reality-based chain of events behind the FBI's actions from early 2016 on and the actions of other official players in the government that can only be clarified now in the courts, and chances are pretty good that they will be. It concerns me because the specter of massive institutional failure in the federal law enforcement and the news media bodes very darkly for this country's future. It doesn't serve anybody to do illegal ass things to try and, you know, take down somebody who possibly might be doing illegal things. But the thing is you make yourself look stupid and you make yourself into a criminal as well. So and then everybody becomes a swamp monster. This could be applied to so many things, but I won't go into that now because I've run out of time in this video. I hope you enjoyed all these articles. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.